I hate introductions, don't you? But it seems like they're always necessary. So here goes. I'm Ashley. I'm a wife, mom, pastor, and missionary's kid, which is double trouble if you didn't know. And if you're in this space, we're here to learn about who God is, who we are in Him, and how to do faith in the real, meaning the real messy. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Chats with Ash. If you're watching on YouTube right now, I hope that you are feeling invited into my space. I didn't want to be behind a desk today. I really wanted to get comfortable. I want you to feel as if you are sitting here with me in this space and that we are getting ready to share our hearts. I would gladly share a cup of coffee with you, but that's rather difficult, not in person. But the hard thing about this journey is I don't ever want you to feel like I'm preaching at you, because I'm not a preacher, and I don't want you to feel like I'm talking at you. I want you to understand that my heart is to let you in. And the topics that I share with you, the stories that I'm putting out there, these are all things that I'm thinking about, that I'm working through, these are areas that God is working on me in. And so my heart is just to chat with you. And hopefully, as we share with one another, because I love hearing back from you guys, hint, hint, we can grow together and come to a better understanding of who God is and how He meets us in the mess. And speaking of mess, as I tuck in my gut, speaking of mess, this episode is all about the loss of relationship. Before I dive into it, though, I want to thank those of you that have given me some feedback. Somebody said, "Hey, I really want to see your face, so stop hiding behind the screen." So here I am. Here's my face. I'm working on it. I feel really comfortable hiding behind the screen, but I'm trying. And then somebody else let me know that there were some sound quality issues. We've actively been working on them since. So hopefully at this point in time, you've been hearing a difference in the episodes. But your feedback is so helpful to me because it lets me know what needs worked on, where I can improve, and it ultimately, I hope, will help me grow and have better quality here as we share. So today is about the death of a friendship. Dun, dun, dun. Like, death sounds so dramatic, I know, but I honestly can't think of a better word for it. We were recently with some friends over a weekend. We were visiting their home. They live out in the country, and our 10-year-old was just obsessed with the word death all weekend. It was like, "Hey, are there dead fish in this pond? Hey, do you think dead coyotes might be over there?" I mean, it was just constant, to the point that we started taking tally marks of how many times he said that word, because it was dramatic. But here's the thing about death. Death is not just physical loss. Death can come in many forms. And unfortunately, sometimes that means the death of relationship. And so my story that I'm going to share with you today is a tough one, but I'm sharing with you because I hope that through the sharing and me telling you what God has taught me and the things that I'm carrying from that time, that they encourage you and that they help equip you as you might be walking through the death of any kind of relationship or just even brokenness in a relationship. Hopefully you don't experience the death because it's really painful. But before I dive into it, it is really important to me that I point a few things out to you. First of all, there's a person that shares the story with me, and she's not here to share her side of it. There are always two sides to every story. There's a verse in Proverbs, for the life of me, I cannot quote it, but basically it says that one side seems right until you hear the other person's side. And so I want to make sure that you are aware that what I'm sharing is my perspective of what happened. And also to know my objective in sharing. My objective in sharing is not to point fingers, to in any way try to make her look bad. I don't think that she will ever come across this content, but whether she does or she doesn't does not change my objective, and that is to be respectful and to honor her in the way that I share the story with you. So I had a really good adult friend. We were as close as two friends could be. She's someone that I thought of and called a sister. And in my life, with traveling and with moving a lot, I'm very familiar with the truth that there are some friendships that only last for a season. Distance is brutal on most relationships. Relationships that happen in each other's space, they're hard enough, right? But when you add distance, it's just tough. And so many of my relationships that I've had over the years have eventually fizzled out, not because of anything wrong anybody's done. It's just kind of the way it happens over time. And yet with this friendship, I just had full confidence that we would always be in each other's lives. I had allowed myself to truly embrace that thought. And I deeply loved this person. Could not imagine life without them. But eventually, I started to understand that things between us had changed. It took a while, and it wasn't because of my blonde roots. Not that I have blonde roots, actually. But we had an understanding between us that because we both had full plates and because life happens, we didn't want there to be pressure between us to always be in communication, to immediately respond to each other. And so we had that freedom. But eventually I came to realize that everything between us was gone. There was a day that she was in my life and we had full access to each other. And then the next day, everything changed. And there wasn't any kind of explanation given. That to me was probably what made it the most difficult. I remember telling Eric that I could have come to an acceptance, to an understanding if the friendship needed to change or if we needed to go separate ways. But what hurt me most of all was the way in which it ended. And in the height of my hurt, I decided that the best thing to do would be essentially to create a safe room for myself in which I could lock myself in, swallow the key, and hope it never came out again. And God was so good to meet me in that place. Some of you listening and watching are probably really familiar with that kind of safe room. It's that place that makes you think you're untouchable. No one will ever hurt you again. It really is a place that's created not just by hurt, but by intense fear. And if you're hurting right now, I want to say something to you that's really important for you to understand. It is okay not to be okay. Sometimes when we're hurt, we just need to grieve. We need to go through the process of grief. And that's okay. What makes it hard in this kind of situation, though, is it's not like a physical death where there's like a social period of mourning that is acceptable. Nobody said or did anything to me that made me feel like it wasn't okay to grieve. However, it was just weird because this person's still here. And yet I was grieving because she wasn't. And I didn't know how to work through that, but I needed to. And you may need to as well. And our God is so good that he allows us to come to him in those places of intense grief and to pour out our hearts for him and to just not be okay for a second. And he'll meet us there. And he met me there. And I found so much comfort in him. One thing that God kept bringing up to me over and over again in that place was the fact that he loves us. He loves me. Because I kept thinking in that place, like, what did I do wrong? What's wrong with me that this happens? And I needed God's assurance of love and presence. Our God has unfailing love. It never ends, and he never changes. He's always faithful. And those qualities about his character became anchors to me during a season where I felt adrift, where it was hard to feel anything but pain. And those character qualities that he has are comforting, but we need to reach out to him. We need to remind ourselves of what is true. I cannot tell you, here is a set formula of what you should do if you are experiencing brokenness or death in a friendship. However, God has given us some very firm guidelines, and one of those guidelines is found in Matthew 18, where it talks about you're to go to the person that you're having an issue with. So in this situation, I reached out in 3 different ways to try to fix it. But also, I needed to do my part and to say, is there anything that I did? Is there anything I need to ask forgiveness for? And that is a huge takeaway. It's really easy in a place of hurt to feel justified, like we've done nothing wrong. And even if we are 100% convinced that we haven't, it is God honoring to just say, is there something we need to talk about? Have I done anything to offend you? And then what happens from there is in the other person's court. But just being that person that's willing to ask those hard questions is a really important step. And so one of the things that I wanted to express in trying to reconcile with this friend was, my door will always have a welcome sign on it to you. That doesn't mean the friendship is ever necessarily going to look like it was, but I will never slam the door in your face. I was so desperate during that time, though, to try to make it better, to try to fix it, to try basically to make some kind of sense about what was happening. In the height of that emotional season, I remember one day in particular, I had spent so much time and energy thinking about this person, trying to dissect the situation, trying to make sense of it, trying to figure out how in the world I was going to fix it. And then that evening, I was reading to the boys a book called Because of Winn-Dixie. And in it, there's a line where one of the characters says, there ain't no way that you can hold on to something that wants to go. You understand? And when I read that, I remember welling up with tears and coming to this full recognition that it was time to stop knocking on her door. It was time to leave her porch. In many ways, it was a moment that felt like standing at a graveside and coming to a realization and an acceptance that there is nothing here. And you need to go in a different direction. And you need to live. And that day in particular was really, really hard for me. I remember shedding a lot of tears that day because I wasn't really ready to let go. But I had to do that. That was the only way to really start healing. Another important thing to know about healing, though, is that cannot happen in a safe room that is covered in weeds of anger and bitterness. God had to help me understand that I am not so very different from the one that hurt me. You, my friend, are not so very different from the ones that have hurt you. I know some of you are like, yeah, but you don't know what this person did, and I would never do X, Y, or Z. Let's just be really careful saying what we would never do. The Bible says that we are all born sinners. Our hearts are desperately wicked. We all hold within us, as a result, the capacity or the capability to do any evil thing. I'm not saying that that's what you will do. I'm just saying it is within us to do it. And so none of us have room to stand and say, well, I am better than that person. Because the bottom line is we have all sinned against a holy and righteous God. We are all guilty. And the reason that it's so important to come to this understanding, to come to this place of acceptance with that truth, is because that is where true healing begins. That is where we start to understand, whoa, I have received grace upon grace that I don't deserve. I have received forgiveness and mercy that I don't deserve. And when you reach that point, then you go, so how can I not forgive this person? How can I not extend grace to this person? It's an amazing place that God transforms the heart, our heart, in a way that only He can. That place really did change the trajectory of how I think about this friend that I lost. It changed my prayers for her. I mean, my prayers for her initially were pretty much like, bring on the fire, Lord, rain it down. And I'm not proud to admit that, but I'm willing to be honest with you about it, because haven't we all been there at some point or another? You know, it's like, bring on the fire. And yet we don't want that to happen to us. And so my prayers have since transitioned from like anger prayers of self-righteousness and pride to prayers of, you know, just praying God's blessing over her life and over her family, and pleading and hoping that she is walking with Him and experiencing relationship with Him and the joy that comes from that. And that was a process. Getting there was not something that happened overnight, and it was not something that I could do by myself. If you are hurting, if you've lost a friendship, if you're losing a friendship, if there's brokenness in a relationship, and you recognize what I called the safe room, perhaps you're in it right now, I want to say some hard truth and full out love to you. When I was in that place, the safe room where, you know, I will never be in a close relationship like this one again. Nobody's ever going to hurt me like that again. Essentially what I was saying was, God, I do not trust you. And I don't think your way is best. And so I'm going to do things my way, and then I won't be hurt. But what He lovingly showed me in time was that if I truly love Him, then I'm going to do what He says. If I truly trust Him, then I had to leave the safe room. My friend, if you're in the safe room, it's not really safe at all. You need to leave it, and you need to trust God and take those steps out of the safe room. It takes conviction, courage, and obedience to do it, and it is crazy hard. But it isn't anybody else's job to pull you out of the safe room. You need to open that door yourself and walk out and extend a hand. That was probably the scariest thing to me after this experience, was extending my hand to other people. And I was in a season of life, because we were pretty new here, where it would have been easy to justify not building friendships. I mean, I could have gotten away with it. But I'm so thankful for the friends that God has brought to me. And I'm thankful for the courage that He's given me to reach out to people and to build those friendships, because being in relationship with others is exactly how He designed it. And we can't do what He's asked us to do. We can't admonish others, encourage others, comfort others, spur each other on to good works. We can't do any of those things by ourselves. It took time to start allowing people into my inner circles after this loss. But they are there now. Can I say that they will always be there? No. Any of us have the potential to hurt other people. But whether they are or are not always there doesn't change the fact that I need to be reaching out and being in a relationship with other people, and so do you. When I think back on this friendship that I lost, I think about the good qualities that she had. I am, in many ways, a better friend and to love more fully because of my relationship with that person. And I don't know how to say this without, I don't want to come across as prideful, but I don't know how else to say this. I also can see now, even in the hurt that came as a result of that relationship and the pain that was experienced, I can still be grateful to her and say, but even in those tough things and those things that really hurt and were damaging in many ways, God still worked those things for good. And because of that experience, I'm a better friend today. Because of that experience, I can more fully love others. And so I can be thankful for her. You can too. We get to choose how we respond. And we get to choose what we focus on. And praise God that He's capable of weeding out the most stubborn, bitter roots of or weeds of bitterness and anger. He can do it, and He can change our hearts, and He will if we ask Him to. The friends that I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, the ones that live in the country, when we were there, I had taken tennis shoes and sandals and rain boots to wear. But more often than not, when we were outside, we would put on boots because we were walking on uneven paths that had weeds and ticks and thorns, and we were walking through creek beds, and we were going through the mud. That's what it's like to be in a relationship with other people. It's this choice that I'm going to put on my boots. And as I go about the way, I may get muddy. I may get a scratch. It may be difficult to walk up that hill, but I'm choosing to walk up that hill with others. I'm really excited because next week you're going to meet one of those individuals that God has brought, who is in my inner circle, and she's someone that God is using to grow me and challenge me and bless me. And so, you might be in a place where you don't feel like that is ever going to happen to you, but it can. You just have to be willing to extend the hand and take the chance and realize that even if you get hurt, there's good that God will bring about if you just trust Him. This is one of those messes that I mentioned in the intro. And yet I hope that in sharing it, that you are reminded of God's unending love for you, that you're challenged to leave any kind of safe room that you've built for yourself, that you are convicted to reach your hand towards somebody else. Relationships don't just happen to you, my friend. You play a vital key role. And I can't end this episode without also saying this. Even after experiencing this kind of loss and hurt and rejection and betrayal, whatever other word I want to use there, it doesn't mean that all of my relationships are perfect. I have since had to create boundaries in some relationships. I've had to have some hard conversations, and I wish that I could tell you that I did it very well, but that's not the case. I carry regret of looking back and saying, wow, I wish I would have handled that situation a little differently. I wish I would have communicated this in a better way. We all have areas that need work. We all have things that we may regret, but God and His goodness and His love towards us, He keeps working on us. He promises forgiveness and He promises redemption, and I'm so grateful that He loves us enough to do that. And when we mess up, when I mess up, I hope that he'll give me the courage to ask for forgiveness, to learn from it, and to realize that his mercies are new every morning. So thank you for being here for this episode. Let's just always remember that when we're willing to admit him, or when we're willing to admit that we need him, especially in the mess of relationships, that's when we start making our stories about him. We start seeing how he changes us and how he can work in even the most messy of situations to bring glory to himself and to ultimately reveal to us his great, unending love. Thank you for being here. I look forward to the next episode where you're going to meet one of my really dear friends. So I hope you'll be back. I'll see you next week.